There was a time when money didn't just lose value, it disappeared. Not slowly, not in theory, but in real, everyday life. Coins stopped showing up. Markets went quiet. Trade began to stall. At first, people thought it was temporary, a bad season, a local shortage, but it spread across towns, across regions, across entire kingdoms. And the strangest part? This wasn't caused by war. No invading army. No burning cities. It wasn't theft either. No great robbery. No sudden collapse. It was something quieter. Something almost invisible. Silver, the metal that powered daily life, began to vanish. Not all at once, but enough to break the system holding everything together. Because back then, silver wasn't just wealth. It was money itself. And when money disappears, so does stability. So what really caused an entire economy to slowly unravel without a single battle being fought? To understand that, we need to go back to where silver truly began its journey. For centuries, silver wasn't just metal. It was movement. It flowed through markets. From hand to hand, from city to city, it paid wages. It settled debts. It turned goods into value. A farmer sold grain. A merchant crossed borders. A worker earned a living. All of it depended on silver, not as an idea, but as something you could hold. And because of that, it created something fragile. Trust. Not trust in governments. Not trust in promises, but trust in the coin itself. If you had silver, you had certainty. If you didn't, everything slowed down. Because trade doesn't run on hope. It runs on exchange. And that exchange needed metal. So when the flow of silver began to break, the system didn't collapse all at once. It tightened. Quietly, markets became cautious. People held onto what they had. Coins stopped moving. And when money stops moving, economies don't explode. They freeze. And that slow freeze would reveal a deeper problem, one hidden inside the system itself. Medieval Europe ran on a delicate balance, coin and confidence. It wasn't a complex system, but it was tightly connected. Silver mines pulled metal from the earth. Mints turned that metal into coins, and those coins flowed into markets. From there, everything depended on them. Food was bought, taxes were paid, armies were funded. An entire civilization moved on small pieces of silver. And as long as that flow continued, the system held together because people believed in it, not in theory, but in practice. A coin had weight. It had metal. It had value you could trust. So trade expanded. Cities grew. Markets became more active. But beneath that growth, there was a quiet assumption that silver would always be there, that mines would keep producing, that coins would keep circulating, that the flow would never truly stop. No backups, no alternatives, no second system. Everything rested on one resource. And that made the system powerful, but fragile, because the moment that assumption broke, the moment silver stopped flowing the way it should, everything built on top of it began to shake. And what came next wasn't sudden chaos. It was something far more dangerous. A slow, creeping breakdown that few people understood at the time. The crisis didn't begin with panic. It began with scarcity. There was no sudden shock, no dramatic collapse, just a slow change. Mines began to produce less. The flow of new silver weakened, and fewer coins entered the system. At first, no one noticed. Markets still opened. Trade still happened. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. Coins became harder to find. People started holding on to what they had. Spending became cautious. Exchange slowed down, because when money is limited, it stops moving. And when it stops moving, everything else begins to tighten. Trade stalled. Merchants struggled to sell goods. Buyers delayed purchases. Prices became uncertain. Wages shrank, not always in numbers, but in reality. Work was harder to find. Payment was delayed. Sometimes it never came at all. And then came the deeper strain. Debts, loans that once felt manageable, became heavy, because paying back money is easy when money is flowing. But when coins disappear, repayment becomes a burden. Obligations remain, but the means to fulfill them vanish. And that's when the system begins to distort. Because when money becomes rare, its absence spreads faster than its presence ever could. And that absence didn't just slow the economy. It changed how people behaved inside it. Faced with a shrinking money supply, leaders began searching for solutions. But they didn't find more silver. They couldn't. Mines were slowing. Supply was limited, and the shortage was real. So instead of increasing money, they changed it. Quietly. At first, it seemed practical. Coins were altered. Less silver, more base metals. The same shape, but not the same substance. Debasement. The value stayed the same on the surface. But underneath, it was weaker. Then came substitution. Different forms of payment. Promises instead of metal. Trust shifting from coin to authority. And alongside it all, experimentation. New rules. New systems. New ways to keep trade moving without enough silver. It wasn't one solution. It was many small adjustments, layered on top of each other. Each one trying to solve the same problem. Keep the economy alive without the metal it depended on. And for a while it worked. Markets moved again. Coins returned, at least in appearance. But something fundamental had changed, because money was no longer just silver. It was becoming something else. And in trying to fix the shortage, they didn't just stabilize the system. They transformed it. In many parts of Europe, the change became visible. Coins were clipped, edges shaved down, tiny amounts of silver taken, again and again. At first, it seemed harmless. One coin, one cut, almost unnoticeable. But over time, the loss added up. Other coins were diluted, mixed with cheaper metals, still accepted, but quietly questioned. And in some regions, older coins were replaced altogether. New ones entered circulation. Same markings, same authority, but less real value inside. What once felt solid became uncertain. Not instantly, but gradually. People began to notice the difference. A coin didn't feel the same, didn't weigh the same, didn't hold the same trust. And that's when something deeper started to crack. Confidence, not in the system as a whole, but in each transaction. Merchants became cautious. They checked coins more carefully. They hesitated before accepting payment. Buyers sensed it too. Every exchange carried doubt, and that doubt slowed everything down. Because markets don't just depend on money. They depend on belief in that money. And when that belief weakens, activity doesn't collapse. It pauses. Trade becomes slower. Decisions become delayed. Not chaos, but hesitation. And that hesitation spread quietly, slowing economies more effectively than any sudden crisis ever could. And as this pattern repeated across regions, it began to reshape the system itself. What began as a local shortage didn't stay local. It spread across borders, across trade routes, across entire regions tied together by exchange. Because Europe wasn't isolated. Markets were connected. Merchants moved between cities. Goods traveled long distances, and silver moved with them. So when the flow weakened in one place, it echoed in another. Trade networks tightened. Fewer transactions, more caution, less risk. Long-distance trade slowed first. It depended the most on trust, and trust was fading. At the same time, credit systems began to strain. Promises replaced coins. But promises depend on confidence, and confidence was no longer stable. Lenders hesitated. Borrowers struggled. Agreements became fragile. Economic activity didn't stop, but it contracted. Less movement, less exchange, less growth. And beneath all of it, something deeper was changing, because the absence of silver wasn't just a monetary problem. It was behavioral. People adapted. They held more, spent less, trusted carefully. And when trust weakens, systems don't just slow down. They start to move differently. And that shift wouldn't disappear. It would evolve into something that still shapes economies today. This wasn't just a medieval problem. It's a pattern that repeats. The materials have changed. The systems are more complex. but the structure is the same. Modern economies don't run on silver. They run on something less visible. Liquidity, confidence, flow. Money today moves digitally, through banks, through systems, through signals, but it still depends on movement, because just like before, money only works when it circulates, when credit flows, when people spend, when institutions trust each other, and when that flow breaks. The symptoms look familiar, not instant collapse, not dramatic failure, but tightening. Banks lend less, businesses slow down, people hold on to cash, spending drops, risk disappears, growth fades. It's the same pattern, just in a different form, because the core truth hasn't changed. Money is not just value, it's motion, and when that motion stops, the system begins to freeze, just like it did centuries ago, which raises a deeper question. If economies depend so much on trust and flow, what does that say about the system itself? The real lesson wasn't about silver, it was about systems. Because metal was never the full story. Silver didn't just hold value. It carried information, a signal. It told people when to trade, when to invest, when to trust the exchange in front of them. And as long as that signal was clear, everything moved. But when it weakened, the damage didn't appear all at once. It spread quietly, beneath the surface. Fewer transactions, less risk-taking, more hesitation. Not because people understood the system fully, but because they felt the change. Something was off, and that feeling changed behavior, which changed outcomes, which slowly reshaped the system itself. Because money isn't just a resource, it's coordination, a shared signal that aligns millions of decisions. And when that signal breaks, those decisions begin to drift apart. Markets lose rhythm, trust becomes selective, growth becomes fragile. By the time the problem becomes visible, it's already advanced. The system has already adjusted, not by design, but by reaction. And that's the deeper truth. Economic change rarely announces itself. It happens quietly until the new system is already in place. The day silver disappeared was never marked on a calendar. No single event, no clear beginning, no obvious end. It unfolded slowly, through shortages no one could fully see, through changes no one could fully control, one coin at a time, one decision at a time, until the system itself began to shift. And by the time people understood what was happening, it was already different. Markets had changed, behavior had changed, money itself had changed, not through force, but through pressure, because that's how the most powerful crises work. They don't arrive loudly. They build quietly. They spread invisibly. They reshape everything beneath the surface. And only later do we recognize their impact, because sometimes the most important turning points in history aren't the ones you can see. They're the ones you only understand after everything has already changed. If you want to understand how invisible forces shape economies, past and present, this is only the surface. Because what happened then wasn't just history, it was a pattern. The systems that failed centuries ago haven't disappeared. They've evolved. They look different. They sound more complex. But they follow the same rules: flow, trust, confidence. And when those begin to break, the outcome is always the same: slow change, silent pressure, hidden transformation. So, if you want to see what others miss, to understand the systems behind the headlines, subscribe, because the forces that shaped the past are still shaping your world today.